This is what you find yourself up against when you run into people who want to use the Bible to condemn black people, women, gays, when they want to justify slavery, subordination. You can stick the Bible in their nose, and they basically say, don't confuse me with the facts, I know what I believe.
Robert Gnuse, thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, so what we want to talk about is, what does the Bible really say about homosexuality? And I start out by saying, back when I was in seminary in the spring of 1971, probably before you were born, I had a New Testament professor in teaching us a course in the first half of the book of Romans, went through the 7 passages in the Bible that people usually use to condemn homosexuality, what we now call the Clobber texts. And he pointed out that none of these 7 passages really talked about homosexuality or a love relationship between 2 free adults of the same sex who were in love with each other. After he was finished, I remember old Walter Stunkel in the back of the classroom. One of the students raised his hand and said, Professor Bartling, if we share this with the members of our congregation, they will hang us from the steeple. And Walter said, you're absolutely right, Walter. You cannot share this with your lay people. They won't listen. But you're clergymen, you need to know this. My point is, most clergymen for years have known these passages don't condemn same-sex relationships, but they can't say anything. People would lynch them. Now, the passages that people quote, first of all, they refer to the Sodom and Gomorrah story, where a bunch of men, all the men of the city of Sodom, surround the house of Lot and demand that he send out the 2 visitors, who, by the way, are angels. Remember that. Send out the 2 visitors that they may get to know them. This may be a double entendre. It may be, yes, we want to ask them questions, but it also has a sexual nuance to it. Lot goes out, says, don't do such wicked things. Eventually, they charge the house, and the angels inside strike all the men blind. Okay, so everybody says Sodom and Gomorrah story, that condemns homosexuality. In fact, the word sodomite came to mean the active person in a male-on-male, or the passive person in a male-on-male relationship. No, I'm sorry, active person in a male-on-male relationship. Catamite was the passive person. All right. This is a story about power rape, nothing more than power rape. And there is an identical story found in Judges 19, in which men surround a house, demand that the person inside come out, that they can have sex with him. And what happens is a woman gets pushed out and she gets raped until she's dead. If the Sodom story in Genesis 19 condemns homosexuality, the story in Judges 19 condemns heterosexuality, because there it's a group rape of a woman. People who quickly point out the Genesis 19 story are strangely silent or oblivious to Judges 19. The Judges 19 story is the template. When the author of Genesis 19 wrote his story, he was looking at Judges 19. Okay, again, my point. The so-called Sodom story is about group rape. If it's about homosexuality, then the identical story in another book of the Bible, Judges 19, has to condemn heterosexuality. Everybody likes to quote a little passage in the book of Jude, which says, for their sexual immorality, the people of Sodom will be punished. Now, what they don't read are the few verses before that. The author of the book of Jude, very small book, doesn't even have chapters, just has verses, starts out the Sodom story by saying, likewise, or in the same manner, meaning, I'm going to tell you a story like the one I just told you. The one that he just told them in the book of Jude was about how angels came down and raped human women, in Genesis 6, verses 1 to 4. The author of the book of Jude is not talking about homosexuality. He's talking about angel-human sex, which was something they saw as very evil. It's not a big problem today, so most people don't tend to think of that. But my point is, if you read the whole little letter of Jude, you realize he's talking about angel-human sex with his reference to Genesis. When he refers to Sodom, he's referring to angel-human sex. What did I say the messengers were? Angels. We overlook that detail, but that was a detail important for the author of the book of Jude. Furthermore, if you look through all the Old Testament prophets, you will find 3 references to Sodom, and in each one of them, the people of Sodom are condemned for social injustice, not for sexuality, social injustice, because they want to do violence to visitors. So that's the Sodom story. That's 2 of our passages.
Can I just ask, Robert, there's one thing that I struggle with in those stories more than homosexuality, and is the fact that Lot and whoever the guy was in Judges said to the men outside, don't hurt this man here, have my 2 virgin daughters and do what you will with them. Like, I actually struggle with that more
Sounds
than
horrible.
Yeah, like what the heck's going on there?
It's a bluff. It's a bluff. He knows they don't want his daughters. They want the visitors. They want to rape the strangers. In both stories, Judges 19 and Genesis 19, they want to rape the strangers. Furthermore, his daughters have nothing to do with those strangers. They would rape a woman if she was connected to the man that they wanted to rape, as in Judges 19. They rape the visitor's concubine. That's one way to get at a man. You rape his woman. In the Genesis story, his virgin daughters just have nothing to do with those angel messengers. They're locals. Lot is insulting them. He's saying, well, you guys want to have sex? Here are my 2 daughters. And the crowd, they get really mad. They get really mad at him because it's not about sex. It's about power over the visitors. We want to show them we're in charge. This is our town. They have no business coming into our city. And yeah, it sounds crass and horrible, but it's a bluff. Furthermore, you are to protect a visitor in your home, even to the point of sacrificing your life. And so he has to make a dramatic move or a dramatic statement like that. But, my interpretation, it's bluff.
Can I just ask, as a biblical scholar, how do you even extract that meaning from the text? Like you've extracted this. Yeah, I'll just extend my question. You've extracted this meaning that Lot was bluffing. Yeah, how do you? Because just in the text it just says what it says. How do you extract all this meaning from it?
Is the violence of the violence of their reaction?
Okay,
they've been insulted, which to me says Lot's pulling a misdirection on them. And then they immediately say, this man wants to play the judge over us. Well, how is he playing the judge over them? He's accusing them of having sexual intentions when what they really have are power intentions. And then they said, well, then we will treat you worse than them. There's no sexual orientation here. It's all about power.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And there's a good question though. You say, how do I come to interpret a text?
Yeah.
You interpret a text with 3 things: your background of ancient Near Eastern, ancient Mediterranean knowledge, your knowledge of the rest of the biblical text, because different texts share meanings, and the third, you look very closely at what the original language is saying. And sometimes we just can't translate the original language clearly. And like I said, when the men speak, it's a double entendre. It has 2 levels of meaning. Well, you can spot that in the Hebrew, but you can't really spot it that well in the English.
Let's do Noah and Ham, because I actually haven't even I didn't even hear of this one.
Well, that doesn't even count as one of the 7 stories.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay.
Yeah, it's a double entendre, but what Ham really does is he simply sees Noah naked, and then laughs about it. And we can tell that because when Shem and Japheth go in, they walk in backwards, cover the old man up with a blanket, and carry him out so they don't see him with their eyes. Seeing somebody who is naked, who's a relative, is a forbidden sort of thing because there's that belief if you see somebody naked, you're going to want to have sex with them. That's the narrative meaning of the story. So Ham really doesn't have sex with his father. He just sees it.
In Genesis chapter 9,
He sees it.
24, it says, when Noah awoke
Right.
from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves. Will he be
now
to his
there's an
brothers?
interesting story there.
Okay.
You spotted it. Most people talk about the curse on Ham. The curse isn't on Ham, it's on Canaan. And that's about politics in the 10th century BC.
Okay.
The Israelites defeating the Canaanites. People for many years, and they still do, talk about the curse on Ham to justify the suppression of black people because they say black people are the descendants of Ham, and that's why black people are supposed to be slaves, because Noah said, cursed be Ham, a slave he will be to everybody else. Okay, curse wasn't even on Ham. Furthermore, when you read the list of Ham's descendants in Genesis 10, over half of his descendants are not African. The list of descendants for Shem, Ham, and Japheth are geographic areas. They're not ethnic identities. But like I said, there is a double entendre here. There's the hint, because to see can also mean to have sex with. So our author is hinting with the thought or the notion that Ham could have had sex with his father just to make the Canaanites look bad. But the story really, you can't put it in the list because it's narrative-wise, it's very clear that what he does is visually sees his father naked and then laughs about it afterwards.
Let's move on to the Levitical laws because these are often used to condemn homosexuality. Do you mind if I read it out and then you go for it?
Yeah.
So we've got Leviticus 18, chapter 18, verse 22. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. And then we've got Leviticus 20, verse 13. If a man practices homosexuality, having sex with another man as with a woman, both men have committed a detestable act. They must both be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. What's going on here?
You have a funny translation there.
Do I?
That second one, that is not what the text says.
Is it not?
That's not what the text says. It doesn't use the word homosexuality. It says,
doesn't it?
Basically, if a man lies with another man as with a woman, you shall put them both to death.
Well, one could interpret that as meaning homosexuality.
In the ancient world, they didn't have a concept of homosexuality.
Okay.
Their understanding was if you were a man, you had sex with women, you had sex with men and occasional animals. They didn't think in terms of sexual preference. A real man had sex, like I jokingly say, if it moved. Women, and they didn't care if women had sex with each other, as long as women had babies for their men. That was the values of the ancient world. Now, the Israelites didn't like that. They felt that sex should be between men and women because sex should produce babies because they were underpopulated. But the point to be made is they would not have used the word homosexuality. If you would go back in a time machine and try to describe for them your definition of heterosexual and homosexual, they would have said, well, a heterosexual is a man who has sex with women, men, and animals. A homosexual is a passive person who allows another man to have sex with him. And we'd say, now, wait a minute, that's not quite our definition, but it's their definition. So back to that Levitical passage. What they are condemning is ritual prostitution in both instances. And the second passage in chapter 20 is a later development out of chapter 18. In chapter 18, you simply put the male passive prostitute, religious prostitute, to death. In the second passage, you put them both to death because that's how you stamp out the religious practice. Now, Why do I say this is religious? Because the other customs condemned around it are cultic practices also. In both chapters, you have the condemnation of offering up your firstborn son as a burnt offering on the 8th day. That's a religious practice. You have the reference to a man having sex with a woman and her mother at the same time. That's a cultic practice, which we know from Amos and Hittite law codes. And then there's the reference to a woman having sex with a sheep. It's got to be cultic. A woman can't have sex with an animal all by herself. She's got to have at least 3 men to help her and hold the animal. If you've got that kind of activity going on, it's ritual activity.
Okay, so but can we just can I ask a broader question?
Sure.
A broader question would be, what is the entire purpose of the Levitical Laws?
When it was first written, and in its final form, probably around 400 BC, it was an attempt to define how Israelites, or by that time they were Jews, how Jews should live their lives to separate themselves from other peoples. Many of the customs in Leviticus go against practices that other people engage in, like kosher food. Jews aren't supposed to eat seafood. They aren't supposed to eat pork. Well, guess what? Most Babylonians who lived around them ate seafood and pork. You're not supposed to make altars. Oh, no, that's in Exodus, but it's a good example. You're supposed to make your altars out of dirt and not stone because that makes you different from other people. The Levitical laws are all about differentiation and thus purity. Now, the real question is, are the Levitical laws binding on us today? And some people immediately say, no, they're not. They're the ceremonial law that passed away. A critical scholar will say, depends on the law. Some of these laws in Leviticus are universal, like you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That never went out of date. You shall not lead a blind man by the hand to make him fall into a ditch. I would say that's pretty universal. But a law like you shall not wear an article of clothing that's made out of 2 different fabrics? Okay. That was a condemnation of the clothing of rich people in other cultures, saying we Jews wear simple clothes made of one simple fabric. That is certainly not binding on us today. Depends on the law. So with these laws in Leviticus 18 and 20, the question is, what are they really saying? Not are they binding on us or not, but what are they saying? Well, they're condemning sex in worship services. I guess that's good advice today. Yeah, probably. But now I have to be honest. This may be the weakest part of my argument. You could argue with me and say, sometimes laws are in a sequence and they're not always consistently talking about the same thing. This could just be a random law condemning homosexuality surrounded by cultic laws. My counter response is, but it's surrounded by the same cultic laws in both chapters, which makes me think this is a sequence of prohibitions that condemn cultic activity. But if you want to be a homophobe, you can steadfastly disagree with me, and I can't refute you as well as I could on the Sodom story, which there it's pretty clear. It's about group rape. It's not about sexual orientation. All right, moving along to the New Testament.
Yes. Okay.
There are things called vice lists where you list a whole bunch of vices that Christians aren't supposed to have. So, for example, I would say to you, Christians should not be mother killers, father killers, slave dealers, jealous, greedy, perjurers. And as you read the list, you want to say, hold on, wait a minute, time out. Paul, you just put some common vices in with some other really horrible crimes. And you look at all of these vice lists and you'll notice horrible crimes are mentioned, but gossip, envy, greed are stuck in. These are the things everybody does every day. So our biblical authors are trying to say, sin is sin is sin is sin. One sin is as bad as another. And take things like envy, gossip, and greed seriously. It's a preacher device. So you hop in your time machine, you go back to Paul and say, you use these two words that we use to condemn homosexuals. What did you mean by it? He'd probably say, oh, I was just throwing some bad words in because I wanted to talk about envy and greed and jealousy. I just picked out nasty words. All right, so in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9, and in 1 Timothy 1, verse 9, there are two words that occur. Malakoi, which we have in the King James interpreted as catamite, the passive recipient, in a man-on-man relationship, and arsenokoitoi, which we have translated as sodomite, the active person in a man-on-man relationship. So we get out our big Greek Liddell and Scott lexicon and we look up malakoi. Hundreds of usages. Malakoi means immoral person, effeminate person, a man who likes to dress in women's clothing, a man who's a sissy, somebody who doesn't like war, somebody who doesn't like education, somebody who only has sex with women, somebody, oh, wait a minute, back up. Malakoi is a person who's a man who only has sex with women? That's because in the Greek world, a real man had sex with women, men, and occasional animals, which tells us be very, very careful in terms of trying to second guess what the author meant by that term. But most of the usages of malakoi are immoral person. So, and it's used in both of those texts to translate it as sodomite is inappropriate. What's that?
Sorry, do you mind if I just stop you? Okay, so are you saying the word malakoi has been translated to homosexuality?
Right. And yeah, it can mean that 1 in 100 times. One interpreter says the best way to translate it would be male prostitute. I think the best way to translate it is a very immoral person, but it can also mean sissy, effeminate, coward in battle, whatever. It's so broad that you really can't say exactly what it means when Paul uses the word.
So why homosexuality then? Why has homosexuality been put in that list? Or why has it been translated to homosexuality?
Because the people who first translated the King James just were homophobic. The word can mean that, but in all fairness, we shouldn't translate it as that anymore because it's just too vague in its meaning. And then you turn to the other word, arsenokoitoi, which literally means a person who spreads himself out on a bed. It's slang. In fact, if you looked in your Liddell and Scott, you'd say, it's hardly used at all. The first usage is here in Corinthians. Well, obviously not. It was used before, but it was never written down. Let me just cut to the chase. Arsenokoitoi means rapist, pederast, and most frequently it means economic oppressor. But it got translated as the active person in a homosexual relationship. Okay, what Paul is probably seeing in his ancient world is slave masters who rape the hell out of their boy and female slaves. And that's what an arsenokoitoi is. This is not a gay, loving relationship between two adult-free males. This is a master-slave relationship. And eventually it comes to mean economic oppressor for the same reason. I mean, after all, who would be the economic oppressors? The ones who took sexual advantage of their slaves.
Okay, so in summary, these vice lists in 1 Corinthians and 1 Timothy have essentially just been, they were abusive sexual relationships and they've been mistranslated to mean homosexuality.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And if you checked a whole bunch of modern translations, you would find that some modern English translations will translate one properly, but they'll kind of preserve the old meaning for the other one. Let me just be crass and say selling Bibles is business. And who buys Bibles more than anybody else? Conservative Protestants. And you better give them the translation they want or they won't buy your Bible. Have you heard the passage quoted from Ephesians? Wives, submit to your husbands?
Yes. Yes, of course, I've heard that passage. Yes, tell me.
The Greek says, wives, so also to your husbands. The verb is to be carried over from the previous sentence.
Wait, what does that mean?
There's no verb there. It's a dependent clause. The previous sentence says, Christians submit to one another in the Lord as is fitting, so also wives to your husbands. It is the submission of equality. Furthermore, while I'm in the neighborhood, the word is not submit. The word is not deluo in Greek. It's apothulomai, which translates best as reverence. So, Christians, reverence one another in the Lord. Wives, so also your husbands. It in no way is talking about female submission. In fact, it really is saying that women in their freedom should submit to their husbands in the same way that Christians all submit to one another. And this is in a Greek world where men have the right to take their wives to court and ask for a death penalty for a crime they consider egregious. The author of Ephesians is screaming feminist, but that's now how modern evangelical preachers will preach the text. And I mean, this is the paradigm passage. The entire meaning of the text has been flipped. Did I just twist your mind out of shape?
Can you see it in my face? I suppose I'm not. First of all,
But this is why I teach the course I teach.
Yeah, of course. But I don't understand why people would mistranslate it. Like, what's the agenda? For women, submit to your husbands, and then for the homosexual, the abusive sexual relationships being interpreted as homosexuality. Like, what? Why would they mistranslate it?
How did it get started? Because translations were made by men. First English translation is created in the 14th century. Then you have more in the 16th century. King James comes out in 1611. They're created essentially by men who want to keep their positions of power. It becomes, after a while, it just becomes unconscious. They just translate it this way. And then we're just stuck with it. What is interesting is that some of the really egregious translations, actually, the King James didn't have them. More recent conservative English translations have them. So, for example, in Genesis 3, when it says the woman took from the fruit and ate, and she gave to her husband who was with her, implies, well, he was standing next to her. I mean, he's as responsible as she is. But King James has that, but the 1952 Revised Standard Version left out the who was with her, as do about half of your other modern English translations, which makes the woman look more like she ate the fruit and then bushwhacked the man with apple pie when he came in a little later after, playing hoops with the giraffes and pinochle with the penguins. Poor sucker puts an apple in his mouth, and it's not an apple, it's a fig. Bam, we got 10,000 years of original sin. That is a deliberate mistranslation.
So Eve didn't tempt Adam?
They tempted each other. The ancient Mediterranean world would have said, when a woman speaks to the snake and her husband's with her, she speaks for her husband. They're equally responsible. And when God fusses at them, notice that he fusses at the man longer than the snake and the woman combined. The man is ultimately more responsible. Yeah, she took it first, and yeah, she tempted him, but she was acting at his behest. He was standing there with her the whole time. She looked upon the fruit and considered it before she stuck it in her mouth. He just grabbed it and stuck it in his mouth right away. Typical guy. So, yeah. The text wants to kind of find equal guilt for both of them.
Can we just go back? Because I just want to touch on Romans chapter 1, 26, 27. That is why God abandoned them to their shameful desires. Even the woman turned against the natural way to have sex and instead indulged in sex with each other. And the men, instead of having normal sexual relationships with women, burned with lust for each other. Men did shameful things with other men, and as a result of this sin, they suffered within themselves the penalty they deserved. What's going on here?
It's a condemnation of the Roman ISIS cult. Now, How do we get there? First of all, every commentator in the ancient world said that. Paul's condemning the ISIS cult. And what's the giveaway? Well, you have to back up 4 verses when Paul says, they made images of God foolishly in the form of humans, birds, 4-footed animals, mammals, and reptiles. Birds. Why does he mention birds? If you're a person living in the Mediterranean world and you hear images in the form of birds, you think of the god Horus, the Egyptian god Horus. In Rome, the Isis cult was extremely popular, and it was a cult that venerated Isis, the mother goddess, Horus the falcon, her son, Sobek the crocodile, and Hathor the cow. There are your 4 critters that Paul names. I'm a Roman. I'm listening to Romans being read, and he starts off by saying people make images of God, of women, birds, mammals, and reptiles. I immediately think of the ISIS parade and the ISIS cult. The ISIS cult is led by women who are said to be virgins. Roman public opinion said, oh, no, they're not. Every noble Greek young male goes there and has sex in the temple with the ISIS virgins. They're not virgins at all. And notice the text does not say that they have sex with one another. Everybody says this condemns lesbianism. And I say, no, it says they have unnatural sex. To which somebody will always say, well, if it's unnatural sex, it's got to be homosexuality, right? To which I say, you want a list of the different kinds of unnatural sex it could be? The Romans felt that the priestesses had unnatural sex with their castrated male priests. Castrated male priests, huh? The Mediterranean world felt that eunuchs or castrated males would have sex only with each other. So that business about they no longer had lust for women, but they had lust for each other, well, they were castrated. Plus the text says they bear on their body the mark for their sin, self-castration. The ISIS cult is the only thing that fits all those descriptions. The particular images, person, bird, mammal, crocodile, ISIS parade, women with unnatural, and you start out with the women because the leaders of the ISIS cult are the priestesses. And then you say the men lusted for each other and had a mark on their body as punishment for their sin, castrated male priests. Hippolytus in 200 AD, Pope at Rome, made that identification. St. John of Chrysostom, Patriarch of Constantinople in 400 AD, made the same equation when he talked about this passage. Paul's talking about the ISIS cult, because the ISIS cult was a living religious activity in their day and age. But most people do, and you just did it perfectly. You started with verse 26. You're supposed to start with verse 22. That's when the creatures get described. And then when you move down to verse 25, it says something like likewise, indicating that we're still talking about the same thing. We're talking about a cultic religious function in Rome that worships gods with these particular images, has a woman priesthood who engage in bizarre sexual activity with castrated males, and then the castrated males bear the mark on their body, indicating they've been self-castrated. But again, my proof is this was the understanding of ancient church fathers in 200 and 400 AD. Not until after 1800 did people start to say this condemns lesbianism.
What I hear you saying is essentially all these Clobber passages have just been mistranslated. Is that correct?
Yeah. And we became obsessed with these Clobber texts in the 19th century and the late 19th century. when culturally we began to think in terms of a homosexual and a heterosexual identity. And then all of a sudden these passages were important to quote. Like I said, in the ancient world, they didn't think of those terms. When the Assyrian army took prisoners of war, it was routine for them to rape the male captives. When Romans took prisoners of war, they raped the male prisoner captives. They did not have recruiting signs out saying, gays only need apply for the Roman army. This bisexual activity was considered normal for men. They didn't have a heterosexual, homosexual definition. That's modern. And once we come up with this modern definition, we go running to these passages and use them as clobber texts. Now, the real question you should ask me is, can I find you a passage that justifies same-sex relations? No. Sorry. Can't find that. The best passage you can quote is when God makes the man and the woman, he makes them male and female. And as homophobes love to say, he didn't make them, Adam and Brucey. To which I respond, Genesis 1 defines normative sexual relations, but not exclusive sexual relations. There's nothing in Genesis 1 that excludes same-sex relations. It just says heterosexual relationships are going to be normative because that's how we have children and that's how the species survives. And realize that the Jews always were underpopulated, so they really stressed having lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of babies, since most of the babies didn't survive.
Well, that was my next question. My next question was going to be about gender complementarianism. So that you have the man and the woman, obviously all the parts fit when you're having, sexual intercourse, then you can make babies. That's a common argument. If we take out all the Clobber passages, one could look and just be like, oh yeah, it seems more natural, male and female having sex, creating a baby, than two female, two male. What do you say to that argument?
Well, first of all, I say, that seems logical, but again, you don't find a condemnation of same-sex relationships in the Bible. And since the 1950s, when we discovered DNA, we began to discover that sexual identity is on a spectrum and it's determined by DNA. Well, I'm sorry, God lets us find out things through science too. Now we know that homosexual relations are biologically normal. It's in the DNA of people. And so we have to kind of realize, okay, that has to temper what we've been saying all these years. And I like to just sarcastically say, I find it interesting that the Bible never condemns homosexuality. It looks like God prevented them from doing that, because other Jewish writings do. 4th Baruch, 2nd Esdras, but the Bible doesn't. Isn't that interesting? I would be willing to say Paul probably did not like homosexuality because he was classic heterosexual Jew, but he never wrote down anything that directly condemns same-sex on-sex relationships. Maybe God kept him from doing that because God knew better. Whatever. But I find that interesting, that you can't really come up with a single good passage to condemn same-sex relations. And now we've got science to tell us that our prejudices are inappropriate.
I just want to ask, how the heck do I even do Christianity if I can't even trust the Bible that I have? If there's constant mistranslation? What would you say to that?
Okay, what I immediately say is, when it comes to the real messages that count, anybody can read the English translations and get the basic core message about God is love, the significance of Jesus, death, resurrection, all of that, and for Jews, significance of the Exodus. But when it comes to all kinds of extra special issues, this is why we create a special class of people called clergy and scholars who study the Bible closely so that they can sort of lead the church in a sensible direction. And as I've said in so many sermons, sometimes we look at a passage and we just don't know what it means, and all we have are 17 different theories. And this is how God tries to keep us humble. Hasn't been working too well, though, has it, God? Mm-mm. But yeah, there's a lot we don't understand. But what's important, we do understand. So you can trust your Bible in the important things. Also, if you read these texts closely, you can see a lot of this in the English. People talking about the curse on Ham for years. If you read the English, you'd say, the curse wasn't on Ham, it was on Canaan. They lied to us. Got to tell you a story. So I'm teaching my Intro to Old Testament course at North Carolina Wesleyan in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, spring of 1980. And I say to the kids, you're going to take this course and you're going to learn about all of these misinterpretations of the Bible, like there is no curse on Ham, the curse was on Canaan. So this older woman, she was 35, she stands up in the back of the classroom and she says, that is not so. The curse is too on Ham. My minister warned me about liberal professors like you. So I'm holding the Bible and I say to her, you want to read it in the Bible? You can read it in the Bible. Here, Genesis 9, you can read. The curse is on Canaan, it's not on Ham. And as I walked toward her, she said, is that one of those liberal translations? Meaning Revised Standard Version, New English Bible, etc. And I thought, as I looked, I had accidentally brought the King James. Thank you, God, for that one. I said, no, I have the King James here. You can read it in the King James. And she said, I kid you not, you've bewitched that Bible. I said, maybe I shouldn't have said this. You can hold it in your own hands. It'll take the bewitching off, and you can see that the curse is on Canaan, not Ham. She ran. I chased her down the halls, trying to get her to read the Bible. This is what you find yourself up against when you run into people who want to use the Bible to condemn black people, women, gays, when they want to justify slavery, subordination. You can stick the Bible in their nose, and they basically say, don't confuse me with the facts, I know what I believe. They simply won't believe you, and they won't read the text. A lot of these horrible abuses of the Bible can be stopped if people would just look more closely at the text for a change. But they don't. Or they'll quote certain stories and they won't quote others. So folks like you get alienated from the church because you've been listening to the magpies on the telephone wires who have been saying all kinds of nonsense for years. And nobody's stood up to them and said, no, here, this is what the Bible really says. You're using the Bible as a weapon to hurt people. Even if you don't believe in God, at least believe it was written by intellectuals who were 2,000 years ahead of their time.
I do want to, as we sort of come to an end, say this. I have a conviction about homosexuality. Like I'm a lesbian, but it's not. It's never been about sort of a loving relationship. It's never been about a loving relationship with a woman. And I never look at the Bible. I'd say I have quite a close relationship with Jesus, and I never look at these vice lists and I never think, oh, I mustn't do this, I mustn't do that, because the Bible says not to do this. My belief, and it says this in the gospel, that we have the Holy Spirit in us, the Spirit of truth, which I believe is the arbiter of truth. I mean, my conviction around same-sex attraction was, it's whenever I desire a woman too much that it just becomes all-consuming and it starts to take over me, and perhaps maybe one might call that lust, but I've only ever felt convicted of that. I've never felt convicted of a sort of the loving relationships I've been in. I was with a woman for 3.5 years, and it was just the most wholesome relationship, and I was always trying to search, and I was always trying to think, like, where the heck is the sin in this? But lots of other interactions with women, I definitely felt convicted. I felt like, oh, there's something not right here. But yeah,
it could be that you've been, like so many people, poisoned by the bad rhetoric from people who are misusing and misinterpreting the Bible. I would say, as a theologian, the same guidelines apply to gay people as to straight people. Sex should be in the context of a loving relationship. And going back to my seminary experience, I remember reading in 1997 that in my church, a poll was taken, and it said 47% of the laity were open to accepting gay people. 74% of the clergy said they would marry two people of the same sex, even if it was against the laws of their state, which said to me, the clergy were way ahead of where the laity were in these understandings. They were just quiet about their feelings, but they had the same attitude that I have now. People who have same-sex attractions, the same rules apply. Love in a committed relationship is what it's all about. What's true for straight people is true for gay people. But gay people have been pounded, especially in the churches, by this horrible misinformed rhetoric, so that they've been made to feel intrinsically guilty or inadequate or worse, distorted. And it's just an abuse of the biblical text, and it's an act of power. Sometimes the same preachers beat women the same way. The same preachers 100 years ago justified slavery the same way. I got a whole series of lectures there, how passages were misinterpreted to justify slavery when they didn't.
So back to my question of, how do you do Christianity? How should we use the Bible then as Christians?
No, we should use it as a guideline for ethics, for life in the church, but we should read it properly. And cardinal rules in reading the Bible. Certain passages are more important than others when you start to do your theology. You turn to the Gospels. You turn to Paul. You turn to the core message. Scripture interprets Scripture. You take the key passages that talk about death and resurrection of Jesus and the core message of Paul, and you use that to interpret other texts in light of that. In ethics and in other issues, you look at the text, you check out, okay, what's the historical background? What is the literary context? And what is the literary message of the text? Case in point, your grandmother probably had to wear a hat to church. Okay, maybe your great-grandmother had to wear a hat to church. Complete misinterpretation of the book of Corinthians. Paul tells the women to wear hats when they go to church. He only says that to Corinthian women. He doesn't say that in any of his other letters. Because in the city of Corinth, if you didn't wear a hat, it meant you were a prostitute. Because Corinth was a port city for the Roman Navy. And this is how the Roman sailor boys knew who was available. Women who didn't wear hats. So Paul says, oh, for God's sakes, wear a hat when you go to church so nobody tries to proposition you. This is not relevant for us today. It was relevant for them. And the meaning for us is act with propriety, which might mean don't wear a hat to church if you paid $500 for it, which I'm sure there are hats out there that cost that much. Sometimes the meaning that it has for us today can appear to be the exact opposite of what God said then, because time has changed. This is why you hire people to study the Bible to find out what it really says on some of these special issues.
Well, this is why I've got you here today. I have perhaps some final thoughts. This is what I believe, and I just want to perhaps ask you. I am all for, just like I said before, letting the Holy Spirit in and letting him do the work. I don't look at the Bible and think, okay, I've got to not do this. I've got to not do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I spoke to a fundamentalist the other day, and he's like, yeah, you've got to follow the Bible like it's a rule book. I've never used the Bible in that way. I've always just let my what I believe is it's about the condition of the heart that matters. Jesus is more concerned with the conditions of our heart. Am I correct?
Yeah, you have to let your conscience. You have to let two things. You have to let your conscience be your guide when it comes to interpreting the Bible, and you have to do your homework.
Okay.
And I recognize the theological tradition you come out of that says you can open the Bible and whatever you read, that's truth for you, and follow that. And I say, no, 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 no. You have to do a little bit of homework first. This book was written 2,000 years ago. God spoke to those people back then. He or she sort of expects us to do our homework when we translate it and read it, so we don't do something stupid like taking Joshua and using that to justify war. No, you got to know.
But I just want to reiterate my question. Is God more concerned with the conditions of our heart than these external actions that we do to try prove to people how Christian we are?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you would say that. But then you'd also quickly say, like the parable of the two sons, the one son says to his dad, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then he doesn't do the job. And the other son says to the old man, I ain't going to do it. But then he does the job. Who did the will of the Father? The one who did the job. Yeah, what you think and what you feel on the inside is more important, but, you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Like faith without work is dead.
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah. See, and that's the sort of thing anybody can read the Bible and see that's its message.
So in summary, what I'm getting from this entire conversation is, use the Bible as a guide, but do your homework, listen, really try and understand what it means.
And look for the core message.
Okay, core message, got it.
And use the core message to interpret the rest.
And you would say the Gospels are pretty core, central to Christianity?
If you're going to look in the New Testament, Romans, Galatians, those are 1 Corinthians, those are the biggies. If you had the four Gospels and those three letters of Paul, you could reconstruct all of Christianity.
I thank you so much for coming on today. I would love to have you on the show again. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, my final thought is what I say to the class. The Bible was created, if you don't believe in God, at least believe it was created by brilliant intellectuals who had a high view of human dignity, human equality, human value. The book is revolutionary. In many ways, it took us until the 19th and 20th century to catch up to its condemnation of slavery and its affirmation of the dignity of women. And we just read it for years, reading it the way we wanted to read it. It's a very liberational book, if you read it clearly and correctly.
Thank you so much, Robert Gnuse.
It was a pleasure being here. And good luck to you.
Thanks.